Okay, and welcome back. I finally managed to have an afternoon off, and we're going to continue our after-action report, Slim versus Bletchley Geek. Quick battle in the snow at night, and previously what you've seen is my extremely haphazardly handled, aborted scouting attempt to determine the approach route that Bletchley Geek was operating on. I did establish intel that he was definitely sending forces this way towards Casafanella. So for the next approximately 40 minutes or so, I had not had any contact at all. The only thing I could assume is that the only time I would see him next is when his forces hit the wire that's out in front of my defensive position. One thing to note. Actually, let's talk for a minute about barbed wire. Now, I had initially placed my wire well out in front of my position, figuring that at the very least it would force the enemy to go around it, or if he had to blast his way through, my teams that are sitting here behind the wire would be able to see him moving up to blast through the wire, and they could open fire on him. However, as you can see, my wire does not stretch across the entire length of this open area over here, and it ends on the other side of the orchard rather short. And the reason for that is I had a very limited amount of wire that I could actually purchase. I'd only used, the last few points left in my force selection to purchase the wire in the first place, and I only did it as an afterthought. But in my planning phase, I think what happened is I came to rely on it far too much, or at least the idea of the wire. Because one thing that I constantly can't seem to get through my head is in the old combat mission games, in the CMX1 games, which I've played for a long time, infantry units could move through barbed wire. The only thing it would do is it would temporarily increase the squad's exposure to 100%, making them more susceptible to your own defending weapons. So I kind of got myself into the habit of placing machine guns or infantry teams out behind a section of barbed wire where they could fire at it, and just using the barbed wire as a kind of obstacle that makes my own fire more effective. However, in CMX2, infantry teams cannot move through barbed wire unless they blast it. So what I really should have done, and I failed to do in this part, is I should have concentrated my defense on the open areas to the sides of the barbed wire, and I shouldn't have even bothered putting teams in here behind it. I mean, aside from this little gap in the wall right here, which can be easily covered from this low wall up behind the road here. Yeah, basically, my deployment of my defenses over here, while it was good-intentioned, definitely became a little haphazard, and I don't think it was particularly effective. What also didn't help is the fact that Bletchley Geek has been moving down here this whole time, and he spotted my wire. I actually went and checked his turn before this one, and he spotted my wire quite a while ago, so he knew the wire was here, and he knew the layout of the wire. So he knew where, to go around the side, or to go in between here, or to go over here. He knew which access routes he had to work with, and he had time to prepare a breach team in the middle of the wire as well, which you're going to see soon. So his assault against the wire and against the positions around Casafanella, despite the fact that he did not know where any of my forces were, like the actual disposition of my defenses, he didn't know. But given the information that he had about the layout of this wire and where it was positioned, he no doubt could draw a few conclusions from it, and he acted accordingly. And what you're about to see is what I would describe almost as a human wave attack. But what we're going to do is we're going to hit play, and I'm going to observe some of the action. Because we're going to make first contact. One thing he did was, I think first contact is going to happen right up here along this approach through these bushes. It might take a minute. As you can see, the prevailing weather conditions So as you can see, in approximately 40 seconds, we can already see the best part of, say, an infantry platoon, probably with squads split into sections over here. We can see an infantry platoon with squads probably split into sections over here. And we can see another infantry platoon over here with squads split into sections. So as I said, Bletchley Geek found the trace of my wire, and he knew exactly where to go and how to support himself. But one thing about the prevailing weather conditions is it allowed him to put, before we even made contact, let me rewind this a little. Actually, let me go all the way back. Right? So we had contact marker here. That was my only indication of enemy approach. And 5 seconds later, okay, 10 seconds later, where is it? There we are. So first contact was made, approximately 28 seconds left in the turn. So over the next 20 seconds, this machine gun team over here will be neutralized. This platoon HQ over here will be suppressed. And several more guys up here in these kind of picket positions out here will be killed or suppressed. And the reason he was able to do that is because if we actually flipped this over and we looked at it from his perspective, he has a team right up here on this wall, then he has a squad back here, then he has a squad back here, then he has another squad over here, somewhere over here. He has an entire platoon lined up just behind the wire over here, and he has another platoon probing through the orchard over here, right? All of these guys are in easy firing range of any of my teams. So what happens when you're playing in very bad weather, and this is true for like heavy fog or snow or battles during the night, the moment first contact is made, right, these guys open fire on this team over here. Okay, and immediately all the enemy teams in this area who could see these guys after they fired, because once you fired, you're more visible, all the enemy teams over here are going to open fire on these guys. And what happens is, that is going to suck in this team, who can now see all of these enemy teams, so they're going to start shooting, and they're also going to take return fire, even from guys over here near the wire. Okay, then this team also sees these guys over here, they're going to start shooting, and they'll also take return fire, which is going to light up all the enemies behind the wire over here. Then these guys are going to start shooting, then these guys are going to start shooting, and then these guys, and so on and so forth, and it just kind of unpeels itself all the way down the line. Every single team that has a view range and a firing angle on any other team will open fire, and everyone will be engaged within just a few seconds. So watch what happens here. I'm going to zoom out, I'm going to put it in wide view. Okay, you can see the entire front. You're going to watch it, and it's just going to unpeel all the way down the side extremely fast. There they are. There they are. More teams, more teams. More teams, more teams. See how the entire line just kind of peels itself open. Right? So what happens is, when you're fighting in very bad conditions, I think we've seen that enough, yes? What happens is, when you're fighting in very bad conditions, very rather atrocious weather conditions, everything has peeled itself open, and now the entire line is engaged. And what happens is, when you make first contact, it's critical in this type of situation here to make sure that when you make first contact, you have a firepower advantage over the enemy, right? So what's going to happen is the Casa Finella, within just a few minutes, is going to be completely overrun, right? Like, you can tell already just looking at the situation and looking at what's opposing it. Like, this entire length of front, this entire defensive positions here, these are all completely untenable now. So what we need to do, right, we're going to have to pull everybody back. But the thing is that this could have worked if, say, I had taken my rear platoon here. If these guys were all up in the front and added to my firepower, okay, maybe, just maybe, we could have put out enough fire in the first minute to suppress the enemy and then force a decision on him. However, we did not. And because we had a lack of firepower going into this engagement, as in the enemy completely out-firepowered us, they're quickly going to suppress my defense, and this entire forward line of defense here is going to crumble and fall apart. And as you can see, Bletchley Geek moved down this approach route over here. He moved down through these trees over here. He spread himself out all along the length of my wire, using as much cover as he could, and he managed to get all the way up to the very edge of my wire before I even noticed him. Which brings me to the next point of using barbed wire at night, or in bad weather. I think what I did when I laid out my barbed wire was a rather large mistake. And I've been thinking about this for a while. And what I think would have been better done with the wire is if I had stretched it out in a very long V shape, leading deep, deep, deep into the enemy territory. All the way down here, like through the end of the orchard. Because at the very least, it would have forced Bletchley Geek to either move around it, and thus attack from a direction that I can easily predict. As in, out here in the open, I could have doubled up my defenses over here along this low wall here, and that would have given me a bit of firepower to levy against him. Or it would have forced him, if he wanted to blast through the barbed wire, he would have done so, but I would have seen the explosion, and I would have known, okay, he's coming through that gap over there. I can move all of my guys into a position to block it. Or not all of them, but a bunch of them, into a position to block it very quickly. So I think what happened here was, not only was Bletchley Geek successful in charting out where the wire was and being able to lay in his assault accordingly, and not only that, but get very close to my own defensive positions. I mean, you saw. This guy popped up right here next to this short wall. He was only a few meters away. We're talking like 20 meters away from this team. And nobody saw him move up this way. Whether he was moving at it, whether he was crawling along the ground or something, I don't know. But somehow, Bletchley Geek got a team within 20 meters of my own guys without me seeing him. And that's an important thing. You really need to make sure you check your line of sight at night and understand that just because you click on the target command and you draw a target out here, just because they can shoot there doesn't mean they can see that far. Right? You need to find a spot that has clear line of sight, and look at that. See, now it's green. Okay? I have about 20 meters of visibility in this direction, and that's from a guy who's standing up. Right? Let's try it with a team that's not suppressed. Let's see. These guys. They're not suppressed. How far can they see? Okay, they can see 148 meters that way. And that's it. Which means Bletchley Geek's guys out back here, they can't see or shoot at them. So what are they doing exactly? Well, if you look at their contact markers and things, they're doing absolutely nothing. They're contributing nothing to the defense. If I click on these guys, you can see they have no markers and they're not able to shoot at anything. Right? And it's the same with these guys. They have, okay, they can see this squad over here. And these guys, they can see this guy over here, but that's because the wire over here, where Bletchley Geek's guys have gone up to, is close enough that these guys can see him, which is why this light machine gun here is laying down a few streams of tracer fire. Which, you know, good for him. But, you need to be very careful, especially if you're going to use wire at night. You need to make sure you use it in a manner that helps rather than hinders you. Because this placement of wire here, while it was very well intentioned, it didn't actually do anything to help me out. And another thing is, if you're fighting at night in inclement weather, do not penny packet your defense. Right? These guys were suppressed. All right, they're about to be pinned down, but they're currently evacuating their position back to this stone wall. These guys are evacuating their position. They haven't taken any casualties, right? But they got rattled, and they're out of there. And most of them are going to get shot before they reach their new location. And it's the same with these guys. They're behind a stone wall. They're in pretty good cover. They took one casualty, but they're out. And another guy got hit, but they're out. They're gone. The incoming fire is so heavy that they simply evacuated their position. Right? And even the 1st Platoon headquarters up here in the upper floor, despite the fact that he has a good field of view and he has a few teams right out in the open, okay, the sheer mass of enemy firepower that's being arrayed against him is quickly going to overwhelm this single little team. Right? So you need to be careful when you're doing this sort of thing. But these guys, while they are pinned down, these guys back here behind this wall are doing slightly better. So what would have happened if I had had these teams instead of up behind that forward wall? Maybe I had pulled them back behind this wall instead. Maybe if I had put another team out here as another listening point so they could see further out. I mean, there's a lot of kind of sort of maybes, but the thing is that you want to use situations like this as a learning experience. And that's one thing I'm hoping to do with this AAR, is to pass along the lessons I've learned and help you guys when you're out there doing your own battles. So anyway, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to play through the next 8 minutes or so in my own particular style. You're going to see all the action. What you're going to see is Bletchley Geek is effectively going to neutralize Casafanella, and he's going to push all of my guys out of these positions. A lot of them are going to get killed, but we're going to end up hard along this rear position up here with the reserve platoon. Right? So this is the line. At this point, even in the very first turn when I was playing the game, I saw what was against me, and I saw how it was arrayed and how much firepower there was, and I knew that forward position was untenable. So the first thing that went through my mind is, we need to pull back to here. And that's what we're going to do. But it's not everybody's going to make it. And also, there will be a fighting around Casa d'Antonio, but I'll detail that later. Anyway, sit back and enjoy, and I'll be back later. Okay, bye. Now, if you need a more graphic example of exactly how short your line of sight can be at night, second in command section is sitting here behind this stone wall. Right over here, behind this stone wall, there's a German HQ team. These guys are maybe 20 meters apart. They're crouched behind stone walls, both of them. They're staring across at each other for the last 60 seconds, and neither of them has seen each other. And in fact, nobody will see anybody until this sniper team walks up to the wall directly in front of a machine gun team over here. As you can see, they were right here. The Germans were right here. And they spent the entire last 60 seconds staring across at each other without seeing each other. So yeah, when you're fighting at night, keep that in mind.